What up, playa? What's up, my loyal day one? Joe Manchin. I gotta do these like TikTok streams so I can do my virtual cam. What up, Grant Withers? Grant, I think you're unbanned, by the way. Just heads up on Discord. Yeah, you're good. What up? Won't be super long of a stream, but I'm gonna try some TikTok stuff. Yeah, we'll see. They don't let me use virtual cam, so it's a little scuffed, but should be good. Or hopefully. What up, Tomato? How do I name my stream when I go live on TikTok? Let's see. How to name stream TikTok live studio desktop. Top left edit. There's no top left edit, motherfucker. I feel like this should be like a very important. Oh, it is right there. It's like, we'll call this debate a lawyer. Trump is bad. Law guy. Add topic. Is there politics? Okay, cool. Law guy talking politics. Why can't I save this? You can now update your gaming topic, cover title, and about me in live. Got it. About to do a speed test. Speed test. Gonna like lag my other shit. Probably should have done that first. Because I guess I'll be like streaming two things at once. We'll do quality. Almost ready to go. Just gotta make sure the scene is correct. Why is there so much fucking shit? I'm gonna try to go live on TikTok. One sec. I think I'm live. Sec. Oh shit, I am live. Alright, one sec. One sec, everybody. My first time doing this. Oh shit, that didn't work. Alright, 1 second, everybody. TikTok folks, hold on. No music. Just let me get live on YouTube as well. 1 second. Don't you dare go anywhere. Okay. I think this should work. Boom. So we're live on TikTok right now. Folks, how are we doing? We're also live on YouTube, Twitch, and all those other places. I can't do the virtual cam setup until I do like some obnoxious amount of streams. So just heads up on that real quick. Folks, how y'all doing? We're setting up some cool stuff in the near future to announce. First off, announcing Lib and Learn guests. Next week, we have Taylor Lorenz. Taylor Lorenz is going to be on the 31st on a Tuesday. Usually be on a Monday. Can't do the Monday. So definitely going to be there on Tuesday. I don't actually know. So I didn't like facilitate that appearance. I know everyone's like, oh, wow. Pisco's like trying to promote Taylor Lorenz. I don't even understand like me platforming Taylor Lorenz. I am not as big or influential as Taylor Lorenz, so it's not like I'm doing anything. And I wasn't even the person who reached out to do it. Not that I would be against it either. I'm not saying that I'm like against it, but just like check your assumptions. All right. That's interesting that you come at me with your assumptions. I did set up the Dylan Burns one though. And we also have Mike Nellis coming in the middle between Taylor and Dylan Burns. So that'll be a lot of fun. Details on my Twitter. I released a statement. I got to start using the Twitter for the official Lib and Learn thing too. But yeah, that's happening. Trying to get some debates with some conservatives lined up. That's one of the reasons we're doing the TikTok stuff. And hopefully we'll be able to do the virtual cam in the near future. Wow. So what does this do? You guys just like put stuff all over me? I feel like Tim Robinson. Or what's the guy's name? God, there's a fucking shit on me. Oh wait, can I use the F word? I don't even know on TikTok. I don't know. All right, let me just get right into it before I lose people. It's not going to be a super long stream, but I did want to touch on a couple things before we get into like Trump related stuff. And that is the discussion on the Discourse that happened yesterday. I watched most, if not all, of the WIC panel that had Destiny Josiah, Hutch. I'm not remembering the other guy's name. What's that guy's name? Bottom left. He triggered me a lot. Very much triggered me. And I have some thoughts on the overall debate, which are not positive. Not positive thoughts, but I'll try to frame them as positively as possible. As much as I can. Okay, but what's this guy's name? Someone help me out on YouTube or Twitch or in TikTok. Let's see if TikTok is better than MIDI. All right, cool. All right, let's start with that, and then we'll get into the Trump stuff, and we'll see if there's people who want to actually join to discuss it. On the Democrat discourse thing, there just needs to be some sort of agreement on what we are in fact debating. and I say this with all love and sincerity in my heart, that so much of that conversation seemed like nebulous BS because we didn't even like agree on what we're talking about. I think that there's, with some important caveats, more agreement hidden in this conversation than people might expect, given the nature of like the passions that were like inflamed during the conversation and the yapping that took place. So that's a first kind of like global critique of that debate, which is like, it really did feel that we weren't even like agreeing what to talk about. I kind of view the conversation in two, I'll say three phases. The first is the meta phase, which I'll deal with after. The second is how bad is Trump / how much is he being successfully reined in. The third is like, what do we do in response to, and by the way, when you guys do those like things on TikTok, everyone on YouTube and Twitch sees it because we don't have the virtual cam set up. So thank you very much for the sombrero. Racists. And the third is like what to do about it. So yeah, and I almost feel like the real debate should be about that third element, which is what do we do in light of a historically corrupt, a historically transformational in the negative sense, so-called president, Trump. As you guys know, it's my belief that he's not lawfully the president. He's just illegally occupying the office of president. That has its own set of concerns. But putting that aside and dealing with the practical de facto reality of him holding the powers and duties of the office, thanks for the super chat, it's important to discuss like what we want to see out of our candidates, out of a Democratic president, Congress, let's say. So all of that needs to be sort of addressed, because I think that's where like the big question marks are. And not just what we do, but when we do it. There's kind of different points in the timeline that people are identifying in terms of the response, which is either like pre-election, what to say to attract people, or it's when they take Congress, what to do with just Congress but no president, or then eventually what to do with a majority in Congress or a president or one of each, right? One, maybe a divided Congress. So all of that I think needs to be sorted out at the beginning, what we're talking about. So I understand and can sympathize with a lot of the sides here. I can sympathize, and let me just read the super chat real quick. Minnie was doing a mini slam poetry every time he got speaking time, so performative. And yeah, I have some thoughts on MIDI specifically, as well as each of the people. I'll give a positive to each of the people who debated, and then also kind of like a critique, as well as sort of my global comments. I would say globally, I'm more aligned with Hutch on that third element of like the what to do thing. Because that's where I think there's a lot of like ill-defined, not really elaborated suggestions that people are offering, which need to be considered. And considered in light of this context where people are saying, like, we need to go beyond the rules. We need to go like a level past what the structure allows for, and query whether or not the suggestions are either A, smart, B, practical, or C, fully fleshed out, or D, within the structure at all. I think some of the proposals from the other side are like fine, and we'd all agree with them, right? That is to say, like, criminally indict members of the administration. I think that's something everyone agrees with. It's just like these other suggestions that aren't fully fleshed out, where we need to like sort of put out the position of whether or not we are in support of it, whether or not we are against it, whether it's within the system or outside the system. So that's where I'm more like with Hutch, in that I think that there is a failure to really sort of propose an actual strategy that's quote unquote outside the box, that's been like fully articulated, that we disagree with, or that like makes any sense. So there are some people who say, for example, we just need to go harder. I'm like, great, yeah, that's awesome. I would love to go hard. You just need to be aggressive. Yes, I agree. We need to be aggressive, right? It's just like the devil's in the details. What is it that we're proposing? And every time something concrete happens, it's like unhinged. It's like dissolve Congress or arrest Supreme Court justices for nothing, or for no like articulable set of facts that would amount to a crime, or it's like do fishing expeditions. So, and I'll talk a little bit about why and where I think the lines are there. So that's just my global critique is like, I'm with Hutch in that phase of the conversation. Where I feel that there's downplaying on the Hutch side of things is that second part that I alluded to, is like, how bad is Trump and how effectively is he being reined in by the powers that be or the structural checks on his authority? Call that the Supreme Court, call that Republicans in Congress, or hell, in any of the Congresses, the states, his own executive branch, the Federal Reserve, etc., the international stage. How effectively is Trump being reined in? How bad is Trump, and how much damage has he done? There, I do feel like the conversation is getting bogged down in an area which I didn't think was disagreement, but where I can definitely understand the sort of thought process by some people that think that like Mitty and Hutch were downplaying the badness of Trump, and I actually do agree with that after hearing that conversation. I think there is some downplaying going on, which is frustrating for me because like I didn't even think that was up for dispute. So I can understand the feeling of like, okay, they're downplaying how bad Trump is because they're like conceptualizing either the Supreme Court as like a complete check on him as opposed to like a partial, somewhat check that is inconsistent and not obeyed always. The judiciary in general, not just the Supreme Court, right? The judicial power of the United States is vested not just in a Supreme Court, but in such inferior courts as Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. So the judicial power is being messed with, not just the Supreme Court. And so you need to take a broader look at the check there, and it's an imperfect, not insufficient check. And some of the points about the sort of ability for bad faith actors to take advantage of lag times between when judgments come down, between equitable doctrines or exercises of discretion that inure to the administration's favor, that wouldn't be inured to the favor of the Biden administration. All that makes sense. And to the extent that there's like fighting on that, it's a little distressing because I don't know why we would like overstate the level of checks and balances for an administration that's completely off the rails. So that's frustrating for me to hear, and I'll get into a little bit more specifics. I'm definitely not going to sit through and react to the debate because it was kind of torture to get through. And then finally, it's like the meta of it, the meta of the feelings of what's like motivating a lot of the debaters or the people who are involved in this conversation, where I, can understand this feeling of frustration with the Democrats of being weak and feckless. I can understand the desire to do more. I can understand more or less why people are emotionally or in terms of where their vibes are at, respectively, either really distressed or wanting to preserve democracy. I understand those impulses, but I don't strictly, speaking, think that they're relevant to the discussion. So let me get to more particulars on the actual debaters. Let's start with Josiah and Stephen. My compliment would be that they both, I think, accurately or more accurately assess the long-term negative consequences of the Trump administration, which can't just be hand-waved. Specifically on the tariff issue, right? It's not just the fact that the tariffs were ruled illegal and therefore unconstitutional, right? Both not in conformity with the statute, but also an ultra-virus act for which the president has no authority, in which case, he's exceeding his Article 2 authorities. I understand and appreciate that they are thinking of the damage done to the structure more holistically than just, well, he got this one wrong, guys. No, it has to be informed by, this is like a bad faith interpretation of IEPA, for example, as well as a bad faith interpretation of the auxiliary statutes that provide for tariffs additionally. And it's not the damage that was done by the Supreme Court's and frankly the lower federal courts as well, reluctance to stay and sort of deference to the executive there is calculable, right? It's both calculable and immense in terms of the damage to the economy, in terms of the lost revenues with interest to all these importers, in terms of our relationship with our allies, which is now rearing its head with this illegal and unjustified war in Iran. All of that is connected. And all of this is leveraged as well for corruption. Corruption, which isn't just like we stopped the corruption kind of thing. Corruption, and you will often hear these accounts from neoliberals and neoconservatives who go into South America will say property rights are really important to establish because security in terms of defensive property in developing countries, whatever, in Latin America, will lead to more investment, democracy, etc., lead to more good results because people won't have to incur costs to protect their property or to pay off the corrupt officer or whatever, right? And I think that, while I don't extend that to its maximalist or free market oriented absolutist lens, I do think that there's something to that. And in the American case too, this corruption has effects. It has effects on market participants. It has effects on whether people will feel confident to consider America a reliable place to either invest or to park their assets or to live, frankly. So, and again, if people might get the impression that a further administration, down the line, Trump might go after them because of their acquiescence, let's say, with a Democratic administration, if that were to occur, and if people have in their minds, this can shift in 2 seconds, and we can get a Trump 2.0 who can just come down on us hard, the universities, the law firms who represented clients who were adverse to the Trump administration, or even hired former members of DOJs that belong to the Democrats in office, or any other kind of lawyer or institutional actor or private actor who has sort of an adverse relationship with the state, that might limit their ability to fully participate in whatever activity or space they're in, or to be there when we need them, right? In some ways, these law firms, these businesses, these tech firms and stuff, they were part of the resistance in the first Trump administration. But you saw how quickly they bent the knee in the second one. And those are real costs. And those are real costs that are not easy to get rid of. Same thing with the bureaucracies, where I think Hutch downplays the nature of the cost there. It's not just about, we'll have to just hire new people and that's it. Or, it'll take a few years, but we'll get them back. You're losing institutional knowledge with all what you're doing in the bureaucracies, let alone the formal rules that you're creating that have the force of law. And that might take some time. That could be stickier than you anticipate. Everyone assumes, right? Well, if it was just an executive action, they can just get rid of it with an executive action, right? But that's not always the case. If you recall, Trump tried to rescind DACA in the first term. Do you remember this? And there's a structure by which the courts will sometimes even consider the rescission of programs or of rules by agencies to be unlawful. So rescissions can be examined for whether or not they're compliant with the Administrative Procedures Act, for example. So some of these rules, the actual rules that they're implementing, might be stickier and harder to get rid of than you might imagine, even with the gloss of this unitary executive theory. And so all of that is a way to say that this is really bad. And Josiah and Stephen are correct about that in a more holistic sense, I think. As well as, I think, their overall perspectives on rulings from the Supreme Court, like the Casa decision that was referenced in the discussion by Mitty, this guy. Oh my God, he's sweeping for this court. He's pretending that these conservative members of the Supreme Court have some sort of ideological consistent frame of reference, which they don't. I mean, look at any, think about the major questions doctrine. Think about originalism itself in the context of the immunity decision, etc. Think about the approach that they use in terms of deference when it comes to some of the free speech cases, or the ability for the Supreme Court to give injunctive relief. There's just many instances of them being inconsistent. And I thought that there was a lot of sweeping there that Josiah and Stephen weren't falling for, and I appreciate that. Where I feel like the critique has to go through is Josiah and Stephen are just taking laps around them on how bad Trump is. Okay, yeah, I totally grant it. And that shouldn't even be a discussion. It sucks that it is a discussion, but I thought we like all agreed that Trump was like historically bad. Maybe there's a question of like, well, how easy will it be to repair what's being done? And the answer should just be, it's like, not easy. This is going to be hard work. And it's not as simple as flicking off a switch. So yeah, that's what I can extract from that part of the conversation. And obviously that's the part where Steve and Josiah, I think, excel, is like, this administration is bad and it's worse than you're implying. And it's certainly not as simple as, oh, Supreme Court reined Trump in. It's an insufficient guardrail. It's one that needs to adjustment, as well as other aspects of the election process, of our, for example, lack of giving the franchise to Puerto Rico and DC, the apportionment, gerrymandering, etc., which were all touched upon, and on these in these areas, yeah, granted to Josiah. I'm frustrated though, but like, that's not what we're here to talk about, right? I thought we were here to talk about like what Democrats should do in response, and that's where I think there needs to be like an answer that's not just go harder, go faster, be more aggressive, because I will agree to that, and I think Hutch and them should agree to that. The question is like, what is being proposed outside the framework of the constitutional order that you think is a good idea that like people like Hutch are unwilling to do? We all agree Hutch is willing to do prosecutions, we all of like crimes that occurred, and we all think that should happen. These people should absolutely be prosecuted for crimes they committed. Who could disagree with that? They should be impeached if the votes exist. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment should be enforced retroactively. Yes, retroactively. They should attempt to annul the pardons issued by Trump through that process, which is what I've suggested. That's been my suggestion. They should absolutely pack the court for reasons that I should make a video about, honestly. So yeah, oh, folks, yeah, I'll talk to Trump people. If you're Trump people, or if you want to chime in, you can in a second. I just am doing this little part first. But I see you. I see you guys. Follow me on TikTok. Anyway, yeah, like, what are the proposals? And here's what I'll say. I think that Josiah has a line which is like, don't do anything illegal. I'm pretty sure that they all seem to have, I don't hear anyone saying do illegal shit. It's like, do borderline stuff. But then we're just gonna like talk about what we're talking about. Doing a fishing expedition, in my opinion, is illegal. I don't view fishing expeditions as legal under the Constitution. I take that as either a violation of due process or a violation of the First Amendment in terms of retaliatory action, especially to the extent that it relates to First Amendment protected activities. To the extent that the fishing expedition relates to like other crimes and stuff, really, even though it's a low barrier to start an investigation, I'm not saying it's like a super high threshold. And I think that there would be plenty of reason to investigate a lot of these people. If it's a pure fishing expedition, I take those to be illegal. That's what they're doing with like Jerome Powell. That's why they denied those subpoenas. I wouldn't even think that there's like authority. I mean, maybe you could, like, a hunch would be enough to start someone like looking in a particular place, but a pure fishing expedition using authorities of the state like subpoenas, etc., I'm going to view that as illegal or unconstitutional. Any kind of action, and for that reason, like, I don't think that Josiah would be in favor of it if I explained it that way. So we shouldn't do it if it's illegal, I think. And I'm not hearing anyone like strictly advocate for something illegal. Just 1 second, folks. Just one moment. Give me a second. Thank you for the super chat. Okay. Would you ever consider doing documentary style videos covering these topics? I think oh yeah, maybe I'll do that at some point. Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate you. And to the extent that you're doing arrests without any probable cause or reasonable suspicion, I would view that as illegal too. That's an unreasonable search procedure under the Fourth Amendment. So we shouldn't be like arresting justices without any reasonable suspicion or probable cause of a crime. So yeah, and we should have to go through the warrant process. And so like all of that though, to the extent that there are crimes that you could arrest a justice for, yeah, arrest a justice for a crime if they've done a crime. Arrest executive officials for crimes if there's a basis, or initiate investigations if there's just like a minimal basis to initiate investigation, which I think that there are legitimate and good reasons to initiate investigations against officials for murder, right? Hegseth and everyone involved in the Venezuela boat raids. At a bare minimum, congressional investigations can even have more sweeping purviews. It is a crime in the United States to do a war crime. So there are international criminal standards that are incorporated as a part of U.S. law. There should be investigations for war crimes or attempted war crimes for the administration for a lot of the conduct related to Iran and Venezuela. There should be impeachment inquiries to all these people for their participation in an illegal war, which I view to be an impeachable act. That's congressional and federal prosecution. Federally investigate them for kidnapping. Open special counsel investigations on kidnapping for all the people who are being rendered to different countries without any due process of law and violation of law. See if there's a federal hook there. Investigate for the sort of trading stuff and the crypto stuff, right? Plenty of hooks there. So there's just like so much to work with there. And there just doesn't need to be an appeal to some illegality or like illegal measure to investigate or to prosecute if there are legal measures. Now, the kind of response is twofold, right? The first is like, well, what about the immunity decision? Well, number one, the immunity decision only, by its terms, only extends to the president, and that only encompasses criminal immunity, okay? For the president. Now, I have, in other places, for example, on Breaking Points, brought up the point from like a doctrinal perspective. It doesn't really seem that the immunity doctrine, if you believe in the unitary executive theory of law, and if you believe in the doctrine of the immunity doctrine, that is, why should the power that derives from the president and is only in the president and merely delegated to other officials, why should other officials who are being delegated that unitary power not also have that immunity, right? I don't think that the court, for unprincipled reasons, would extend it farther than the president, just so you're aware. My bet would be if you prosecuted, well, we'll get into pardons, don't worry, we're going to get to pardons. If you tried to prosecute administration officials other than former presidents, my guess is, from a realist perspective, the court would find a way to distinguish their incoherent doctrines because they're hacks. And they wouldn't want to take that step and be like, okay, every single employee of the federal government, because it's a unitary executive, has presidential immunity. So first, know the scope of the immunity decision. And also note that the immunity decision doesn't make things legal. I hear this a lot too. There's a conflation between immunity and legality. Just because you're immune from criminal process for specific actions doesn't mean that you're that those actions are therefore legal. And so there's a whole other host of potential ways to hold people accountable for illegal conduct or politically bad conduct, usually through Congress, that isn't through the criminal process. So just try to understand and keep the scope of the immunity decision in your mind. It only extends by its terms to the President of the United States, alleged. We'll get there. And also it only encompasses criminal immunity. It doesn't encompass other forms of punishment other than criminal immunity. There could be other doctrines for that, but we're not dealing exclusively with criminal processes as a punishment. There are other ways to hold people accountable, including disqualification, which we'll get to. Then it's the issue of like the pardons. The pardons is like a bigger, in my opinion, limitation to federal prosecution for a lot of people. I suspect, and I think most of you do as well, that Trump is going to pretty much pardon anyone he's on good relationships with from the administration, right? Maybe not like Kristi Noem or Corey Lewandowski, but he might even do them. And if he did like refrain from doing so, it would only be because they're like embarrassing him and he's no longer close to them. He doesn't need them anymore or doesn't want them anymore. So keep that in mind as well. The pardons are going to be tougher to address because that's an authority that's pretty broad for the president. I've recommended the following reactions. First, we need to get rid of the pardon. From a structural, this is only perspective, doesn't deal with what if he does all these corrupt pardons, all right? It's only perspective, so agree with that. But we need to do that. We need to like actually either pass an amendment to change the pardon. That's basically it. We need to get an amendment. We need to have an amendment to get rid of the pardon. And we need to start pushing for that because this is crazy. It is such an opportunity for people to just be corrupt all the time. Number two, I've advocated this Section 3 theory, which would hold Trump to not have been the president in office. I think it's consistent with the Anderson decision that was passed in 2024, or that was released in 2024 on the Section 3 case. So my belief is this theory that would hold Trump to have been not in office during this period of time, it's my belief that that is a correct theory, and B, not sort of violative of the Anderson decision that the court actually considered Section 3. That would require Congress to pass specific implementing legislation for Section 3, and also directly pass laws. In my opinion, this would be the easiest way. Just pass a law declaring certain people disqualified under Section 3. Maybe there's a due process consideration that comes into focus, and if that comes into focus, we'll just make some sort of basic set of procedures or give it to the courts to adjudicate. I have confidence in the courts to determine that Trump engaged in insurrection. I think that that is true, and I think it's supported by the Constitution. Now, there are other barriers to annulling all of his official actions if he didn't hold office. I recognize that there's a de facto officer doctrine, but I would be in favor of trying and pairing this with Supreme Court reform and expansion. But other than that, it's going to be tough to get around those pardons. But I would try. And in fact, I would pass an amendment if I had the power. This amendment would never pass. You need to remember, 3/4 of the states, after 2/3 of Congress, passed an amendment. There's another process, but it's not one that's likely to occur. But you need 3/4 of states and 2/3 of Congress to pass an amendment. I'd be in favor of an amendment of literally amending the Constitution to undo all the actions of Trump, including all of his pardons, including all the Jan 6 stuffs, and to reinstate convictions to the extent that they've been undone. Like, I would literally support an amendment directly reinstating all the convictions of the people who were pardoned under Trump term 2. I would support that. But it's never going to happen. It won't be passed. You don't have the numbers. But I would support that. Other than that, you don't have much to go on. State prosecutions. I would go ahead with state prosecutions too. The questions come, right? Like, what if that doesn't work? What if that doesn't work? Well, at a certain point, right? At a certain point, there's like, okay, you can keep asking, what if that doesn't work? And someone's going to have to draw a line. And for you, that line might be schmurder, right? And that is, by the way, a line that Soy Pill, for example, has expressed. Like, no, we wouldn't like unalive somebody because of, see, I'm getting better at TikTok lingo. If like all the legal process didn't work, we wouldn't like put someone in Sikot if all the processes didn't work. So everyone has a line. I just don't understand why it's unreasonable to have as a line like good faith interpretation of the Constitution. Oh, we have a super chat from Josiah who says, for what it's worth, I co-sign everything you've said so far about specific potential remedies, except perhaps the outright abolishing the pardon power, but I explicitly forbid preemptive or self-pardons. Yeah, okay, yeah. So some sort of pardon reform. But like, so I'm understanding Josiah, maybe a little less so Destiny, but certainly Josiah, to have as his line, like, don't do corrupt or illegal things. So all of that to me sounds consistent with what Hutch is saying, consistent with what I'm saying. Just like, have as a line a good faith, or at least a plausible understanding of the Constitution and the legal system of the United States, and be aggressive and exhaust remedies, right? These are all things I think that we would agree on. And so some of the proposals I've heard, like a fishing expedition, I think if I explained to Josiah why I think that's unconstitutional or illegal, I think he'd be like, yeah, okay, then don't do that. If I explained to Josiah, okay, arrests of people without any reasonable suspicion or probable cause are illegal, he'd be like, then don't do that. And he wouldn't, I think, endorse explicit corruption either. So I don't think that there's much disagreement on that. And the other proposals of reform that Josiah embraces, like, we're all aligned on it. I think Hutch is maybe a little vocally resistant to, like, whenever I hear him sort of reference the proposal to expand the court, he seems a little hesitant, even though he's like, oh, I guess, I mean, like, if you have the votes for it. So I can also understand the kind of like, come on, let's be a little ambitious. But that's why it's so frustrating, because like, it feels like most of the conversation was out on that like first part of the issue of like how bad Trump is. That's like not really what this discourse has been about, or it should be what it's about. We shouldn't have to like recapitulate all of Trump's badness. If we're talking about like what Dems should do, you know? Other proposals like Nuremberg, a Nuremberg style, whatever. It just depends on what you mean by Nuremberg style. If what you mean by Nuremberg style is like ex post facto criminal laws and like unconstitutional shit, then no. If what you mean by Nuremberg is like a big focus and a big all-encompassing investigation with buy-in from multiple actors, then yes. It just like depends what you mean by those terms. And that's why I want clarity on like what it is we're talking about. All right. Hope I vocalized some frustrations. So that's where I think, yeah, you can praise Josiah and Destiny for running laps on them on Trump bad. I just didn't hear from Josiah and Hutch much disagreement. And thank you again, Josiah, for the super chat. Also for what it's worth and biggest major $20. Wow. Biggest major differences seem to be how much of a priority to make it, how much of a necessity it is, how much effort and political. That's another one. Yeah. So that's a great point. That actually is a very good point. Let's get to that in a second. But it's a really, really, really good point. Got it. So anyway, yeah, I don't hear much disagreement on the actual substance of reforms from Hutch and Josiah's point of view. To the extent that there were proposals offered by Stephen, they didn't sound like illegal or blatantly corrupt. They just really didn't. And so it feels like he's upholding that same Josiah line that we would all agree with. And so just like, then what are we arguing about kind of deal. I think Josiah might have his finger on it. I think that the aspect of this might be like, well, how popular would it be? Yeah. Pisco, they have to keep looping on Trump bad because Mitty and Hutch seem to emote that he's sufficiently getting checked. I think that's there's something there. But I think that like also we should just like better organize the debate then and structure out like what the topics are. And maybe that's just me having this kind of like desire to get to brass tacks. Can you expand on why it's illegal, unconstitutional to investigate people who the admin thinks may have done something? No. That I don't think is unconstitutional or illegal. If your motivation, right? There are a couple of motivations that are repugnant to the Constitution. If your motivation in an investigation is just retaliatory, in that we're just looking for a crime, we initiate an investigation without any articulable set of facts of criminality, and just like basically nothing, we're just like looking for a crime. I view that to repugnant to notions of due process and substantial justice. So like I would view that as illegitimate under the Constitution. Especially, maybe you could say you could start an investigation on a hunch, open source kind of stuff, and that's enough to just be like, okay, this person has been such a social blight. Let's just see what else he's doing. But even there's kind of like a predicate offense. There's kind of like a predicate little thing there to hook you in to an initial investigation of a person and what they're doing. Okay. And if we don't have that little hook, I'm not going to be in favor of subpoenas. I'm not going to be in favor of like all that kind of stuff. But the thing is, there's plenty of hooks here. There's plenty of like legitimate bases to start investigations. So we don't even like need to wonder about fishing expeditions because there's just like a lot of there here, right? There's a lot of corruption, a lot of illegality. And so it's like not a problem. That's like not a problem. There's plenty to investigate, you know? Okay. So I even also agree with the super chatter who just said the loop is partly because Mitty and Hutch like kept wanting to litigate how much Trump is being checked. And the answer, obviously, he's somewhat being checked. Somewhat he's being checked. He doesn't exercise complete authority in the United States. That's true. But not sufficiently, right? I think that everyone should just agree with that. There are some checks. The system hasn't completely been evaporated. I think everyone should just grant that. And Hutch and Mitty at times felt like they were downplaying that. The extent of, or upplaying. Is that a word? The extent of check, right? Okay, on to Josiah's point with this $20 super chat. Yeah, I think that maybe there's the real disagreement is on how much political capital to spend on these kinds of measures, right? How important is it to have accountability? And here I just think there's an equivocation on the deterrence aspect of it. So I agree, it's high salience. For me, it's the most important issue. It's the most important issue for me is accountability, punishment. And I will look to every candidate to signal how I feel about it, to signal how they feel about it in terms of how I'll vote. It's the most important issue for me. So I think it's high salience. But there's this kind of like equivocation on deterrence, which I'll get to. Sorry. Okay, we have another super chat, $10. I'm open to hearing your input as is regardless, but I feel like your summary of my position misrepresents what I try to make clear a few times. Okay, well, this is MIDI. Oh, this is MIDI. Okay. In a second, we'll hear the critique, or maybe you can respond to the critique. But I appreciate the super chat. Alrighty. Where was I? Holy shit, I was somewhere. You motherfuckers. Oh, the equivocation on deterrence, right? An equivocation is when you use one term in multiple different ways, right? Where the language is unclear because you're using like multiple definitions for a given word. So there's a version of deterrence which is like specific deterrence. And so the question is asked, well, they weren't deterred by this, right? They kept doing this X stuff, right? And so why is this even useful? Why is it even useful to punish these people given that they did X, Y, or Z, right? The response to that is, well, number one, we don't feel that the deterrence ever fully kind of vested almost because they had this escape hatch. And so the deterrent effect wasn't fully felt because of this escape hatch. I would quibble a little bit with that. I do think that indictments by themselves carry a great deal of social weight to them. They impose costs on people. And so I'm not here to say that there was no specific deterrent effect or potential specific deterrent effect as opposed to a general deterrent effect, which I think is really what I'm getting at and what Josiah and Stephen are getting at. General deterrence, I think it's high salience. There needs to be precedent set that these, unlike the Nixon precedent and the Ford pardon, which I think was disastrous, unlike the incomplete reconstruction and punishment for the traitors in the Civil War, there needs to be a general deterrent effect imposed here in the long term. In the long term. And that's important for long-term stability, in my view. Not to say that we can't survive as a country without it. We can. I just think we maximize long-term stability by imposing costs. And that's general deterrence. As to specific deterrence, a lot of these people don't even have souls, right? Like a lot of these MAGA people, they just are always corrupt, always evil, and those aren't the kind of people I want to deter. I want to deter the kind of people who are deterrable. Although Soypill also raises a good point, which is like, sometimes you just need to lock them up for protection purposes, to protect society from the actions that you took and from doing it again. And I think that that is true, by the way. I think that Donald Trump not only needs to be in prison because he did something wrong and for general deterrence, but to protect the country from Trump doing more crimes. So there's multiple bases to punish and hold accountable here. It's not just deterrence. It's not just specific deterrence. It's general deterrence as well. And it's protection of the country. And it's also on a longer time horizon than I think people are giving credit. That's why it's a high salience issue for me. One of the most important issues for me. And also because accountability, because of the nature of how complicated it would be to accomplish given the pardons or whatever, it's not just by itself. The accountability carries with it talks of reforms for our democracy, which are desperately needed. And so it's not like we should view the accountability agenda in a vacuum, right? It can carry with it the reforms desperately needed for market corruption, the crypto stuff, the betting on assassinations, the votes for Puerto Rico, Supreme Court reform. And so the political capital spent on accountability and punishment shouldn't just be seen myopically or narrowly in the context of like the specific actions being taken. It's part of a broader agenda, which requires us to expend time talking about it. And that's why a lot of candidates are talking about it, even in ways I don't agree with, right? Gallego was going after Merrick Garland. You guys know I'm the last Merrick Garland stan in the world. So yeah, it needs to be thought of. In other words, accountability as a project needs to be thought of more expansively than kind of the limited action being taken there. So I do think there's a disagreement there on like how much we're willing to spend from a capital perspective, political capital perspective, to achieve that accountability. But everyone agrees there ought to be accountability. There should be accountability. Okay. All right. So those are my frustrations. We got to the is Trump bad part. We got to the what to do after, where I think there's either a lack of clarity on what the proposal is, This is where I understand the frustration from someone like Hutch, someone like Wick, right? But then I also understand the frustration from Josiah, Stephen, Destiny on the, like, when they do offer a proposal, like, we did offer a proposal. This is the proposal, right? Well, it either is something that fits in our framework. And so the reason why you're getting like pushback is, well, this is just something we agree with. And so we're frustrated because we're not hearing the really edgy stuff that we thought would be coming or forthcoming that is like inconsistent with the constitutional structure. All right, let's talk about Mitty specifically since he was in the chat. Compliment sandwich. I really did appreciate his mustache. His lighting was really good. And I'm condescending. It's just a joke. I do think that there's a virtue in defending the structures of the country is not totally useless. So I wouldn't like get rid of the Supreme Court. I don't say the Supreme Court is like totally useless as an institution. In other words, I would rather have the Supreme Court even as it is right now versus not having the Supreme Court at all. Even if it meant a limitation on democratic agenda, I just view having the judiciary at all, even just some check, some place where you have to write down reasons, right? Some place where you have to go to court and physically show up and give evidence and stuff, even if it's horribly skewed, the existence of a judiciary that at least on paper is trying to be independent is a worthwhile check. And so to the extent that there's people who are arguing that these courts are really important, I agree. The only problem there is like, I just don't think Josiah would disagree. He obviously takes a harder view on this judicial maximalist or judicial supremacy, so-called judicial supremacy vision of the law. But in general, I don't think if you would ask him, like, should we get rid of the courts? Should we make the courts just like rubber stamp institutions? I don't think he would say that. But I do appreciate, all right, now to like the criticism part of Mitty. I do think that there was a lot of downplaying. I think you're wrong about CASA, that decision. I think you're wrong about the nature of the harm done in the tariff case. I think you're wrong about the nature of the good the authority given to the president with respect to the tariff powers that he's now invoking. I think you were wrong about what the court specifically ruled on, as in which tariffs were authorized by the court or not. They only looked at IEPA. That's it. I thought I heard you say that they said that you could do it in these other ways. They didn't rule on it at all. And I think that's sweeping for the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is not, and I heard you also say that there's some like ideological bedrock to a lot of these conservative justices that is like consistent. I just don't, in the important cases where there's some sort of political salience to whatever they're deciding, I don't see that. And I think that there's been a lot of inconsistency. I don't view your assessment of the justices as I heard them. Again, this was last night and I was doing other things as well. I didn't agree with those either. I also felt that sometimes, this is just my critique, and I'm a yapper too, some of your commentary was lost in how you were phrasing things. It felt sometimes that your sentences like didn't relate to each other. And so I had some tough times actually like hearing you. And maybe that's just a block. Maybe it's because I was distracted or whatever. That's my criticism there on that. And I'm highly resistant to, highly antagonistic to any sweeping for the Supreme Court or kind of mitigating the harm done by Trump with respect to his actions taken. So that's my view. And I don't think we should be spending that much time like, I did endorse Grant Plattner. What? I literally did. There's a tweet of me. There's a tweet. But there's tweets. Like Kavanaugh and Thomas, calling out Kavanaugh and Thomas, like that's just like Alito is the biggest conservative, just like ad hoc ruler on the entire court, number one. And I think Roberts deserves your ire as well. I think Roberts is very unprincipled. He has this kind of like short-term view that the court should be respected, but like his rulings, I think, make no sense many times. Not always, but I think that Roberts is a unprincipled jurist, and he's not been managing the court well, and history will remember him as one of the worst chiefs in our republic. Barrett has been a little better, definitely my favorite of the conservatives, but it's not a knockout with her. And I thought that her ruling in the CASA decision was like not convincing in the slightest. So yeah, a lot of disagreements in the legal aspects of things. I forget some of the more discrete issues that you raised there, but I remember being like triggered at what you were saying. But we can talk about it if you ever want to. Okay. Is that it? So I felt overall summary, the conversation was incredibly frustrating to listen to. I can understand the different perspectives. It felt like there was no heated desire to get to the core of the disagreement. And I was disappointed in that from the amount of laps that Destiny and Josiah took on the Trump is bad. So I'm disappointed that they took that many laps, but I'm also disappointed that Mitty and Hutch put up that many barriers to categorizing Trump's harm as like really, 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 really bad and long lasting, which is just obvious to me. So we should have just like skipped that whole part of the conversation. Everyone should have conceded to like most of Josiah and Steven's framing on the badness of what Trump is doing, and just talked about like, well, what do you want in response? That part of the conversation wasn't really clarified. Can you jump in for like a second? Sure. Do you have a TikTok or do you have a Discord? Discord. Okay. I think TikTok people, tell me if you can hear Mitty when he calls. Just send me a message. Do you know my at? I think that TikTok should be able to hear him. Guys, I'm a boomer, all right? We're gonna get Mitty on the line. I've been critical of him. I know I said debate a lawyer, and I haven't done that yet. Okay, Erudite is giving me your at. Soypill really got good debating Hutch after the WIC panel. He was able to well articulate his position and was more effective in the setting of the narrative. Yeah, I just have trouble sometimes following Soypill's like prescription, other than just like do bad things. You guys ever see the Boondocks episode? He's like, I like to do bad things. Sometimes I get that feeling from our boy Soypill, where I understand and agree with him again on the nature of Trump, the harm of Trump. All of that is agreed. I just like don't understand the what do you want us to do? And I always feel like there's a sneakiness when like, do you think that if they were in power, they would do this? Do you think that if they were in power, like when those questions come up and instead of clarification on the proposal, I'm like, oh, you're like dodging right now. Like, you know that you're like not being upfront about what you want to do. When you just ask questions that just go back to like, do you think Trump is bad? Like, do you think that, right? Like, they'll be like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? Well, first of all, do you think that if they were in our position, they would even give a fuck? Like, that's not addressing what is being asked. And so when I hear that sometimes, and this is both of Destiny and Soypill, I often hear that tactic. I don't know if it's like bad faith or whatever, if they're just, I'm not ascribing bad faith to it. I just like, my alarm bells go off when someone's asking like, what's your proposal? And they're like, well, hold on. I just need to get you to agree that Trump is bad. Like, okay, can we just get the fucking proposal? Sorry for swearing, TikTok. Yes, please. Thank you. My ad is just at Pisco Lady, by the way. The same as it is on TikTok. Follow me on TikTok, by the way. Folks, follow me on TikTok. You get me, though? Like, when clarity is sought on a thing, it should just be given. It shouldn't be like, well, what's important is the outcome. The outcome is what's important. No, that's not the only outcome. Like, you'd agree it would be really, really bad if there wasn't some sort of punishment, right? Yes. So then you just know the result you want, and then that's it. Like, no, that's not it. That's not what we're talking about. Yes, we all want the result. Agreed. We wouldn't do anything, literally anything, to get the result. Okay. We're still waiting for. Oh, Mitty. Nice. Yo, what up, dog?
Hi, am I coming through?
Yeah, TikTok. Do you hear a man with a mustache? Do you hear that? TikTok, just say, okay, yes. Yes from TikTok. Okay, cool. Mitty, how you doing?
Doing well. Doing well. Yesterday was a lot, but we're here. We're hanging out.
So
Um,
do you like stream?
but no, I just hang out mostly in Erudite's community. Sometimes I'll super chat every so often, but I'm just kind of hanging out. This whole liberalism thing has been like super important to me. I know Wick and Erudite both like where we all chat a lot and share the news and such. So I kind of pulled that leverage to get onto the stream. Or he was looking for somebody and IRI dropped out and I was like right there.
Awesome.
Um,
So, but like you're steeped in these issues, and you like follow the
yes.
discourse. Okay, got it. Are you Republican?
Yeah, yeah. No.
Okay.
um, no. I was in 2020, but J6 and then Destiny's stream was kind of my pipeline into actually realizing that I, at that point in my life, didn't really know anything
Oh, but
about
you
the
were a
world.
Republican.
I'm
Okay.
born into a conservative family. I was a Gary Johnson libertarian in 2016. Um, and it was just kind of like a passive coasting on like theory maxing. Like I can think of like it hadn't, all of that had nothing to do with like reading and knowing things. It was just sort of like, this makes sense and I can say it and people can't respond to it. Um,
I don't know what it is. I just there was something about how you were. I just have like a. I wanted to ask that because I had like a feeling like this guy seems like centristy typey Republicy type, but
no. To
not
be
anymore.
clear,
Okay.
like I dedicated 2024 specifically to in my personal life to like strict anti-Trump campaigning. This was like an existential loss in basically every way.
Wait a second. Just 1 second. Just one second. Why is this saying inactivity? 1 sec. Why is this saying inactivity? Um, TikTok. You guys can hear me, right? Okay. I think we're good. My bad. All right. Cool. We're back. The puzzle thing. Yeah, the puzzle. That's so annoying. I have to like do a fucking puzzle like on the spot if I'm like in a heated conversation. That is really annoying. All right.
Goodness.
My bad. So you are a
I think
now
your cam on YouTube is off.
you're lagged. Don't worry, I fix it.
Oh, okay.
We're
Okay.
good.
Sorry.
So you are now we would consider yourself a liberal Democrat type person.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
I mean, practice. Yeah. I could be more like particular about like what the core philosophy is. Like I may be like pragmatic civil libertarian, maybe. But I think in all ways, whatever that philosophy is, like Biden embraces that ideology more than any Republican candidate. I regret all of my votes like prior to 2024, like 100%.
No worries. All right, talk to me.
I'm not here to defend necessarily like all of the interpretations of everything because obviously that's a much larger conversation. I think really what I want to say is one, I understand why there's a disconnect here because that conversation was very disjointed. This was my first big debate thing. I definitely didn't do I would say on my own side, didn't do a good job holding a through line. I let the context of what we were talking about change and I didn't really notice that. So there was a lot of things that I feel like as you recap it, I think your recap falls kind of into that context change. And the through line that I was trying to follow wasn't necessarily what people were interpreting it as, which I think comes down to like me not doing as well as I could have. Um,
First of all, I just want to say like way to throw yourself into the lion's den. It is not easy to jump into a panel with like a bunch of huge content creators like Josiah is getting tons of views. You have Destiny on there. You have Hutch thousands of subscribers. So it's definitely like a tough situation in terms of just like the moment. And so kudos to you for stepping into it. And I'm not trying to say that like you triggered me a couple times. I'm not trying to say that like you're a bad person or anything or you're dumb or
yeah,
something.
and there's some of that triggering that is on the table, and I'll stand by, and maybe we'll talk about it
Okay, yeah.
sometime. But I think most of it, I think, comes down to what I was actually trying to say. And like I said in the super chat, I try to make it very clear that I acknowledge and accept fully that just by virtue of damage done, like I feel like there were three things being judged, and we were hopping between all three of them depending on like what point we needed to make in the moment. And I'm like fully conceding that like the Trump administration has like 100% like I'm trying TikTok. We're on TikTok. Has 100% made the lives of so many people worse, like irrevocably. Like it is damage has been done. Our trade relationships are destroyed. The Supreme Court absolutely should have stayed the tariffs. There's just like no world where like the court's giving this deference. I understand, but what I'm saying is that like, and the point in everything that I was saying about SCOTUS, it isn't to it's not to downplay the damage. It's not to ignore the damage. I tried at least. Maybe it was prior, maybe it was after, I don't remember, was to not to downplay the damage, not to say that these decisions were good and all right. The thread that I was trying to follow there, but I feel like I got lost, was I was trying to say that the character of the court itself, I would say, and maybe we would fight on this, I don't think that they're making like overtly partisan considerations and like changing their rulings. I can't think of a single vote except the ones that I call out. I think that the Kavanaugh and Thomas and Alito probably. I'm not trying to go one by one, but like I don't think of any of the rulings that would change if there was like a blue D next to the name of the president at the time. Which isn't to say that their ideology and their underlying choices aren't problematic and aren't causing damage, and that we shouldn't strive to win as many elections as we can to replace every single one of them for the health of our country. But the through line of that moment was talking about like, well, can Trump just do whatever he wants? And then how do we interpret the fact that they took away his primary like economic agenda tool?
Yeah, no, I think that there's first a lot of agreement here on the following. The Supreme Court is not just giving Trump everything it wants. And we know that from at least three rulings, if not more. The ruling on the federalization of the National Guard through one of these statutes defining the regular forces, that was a ruling that was negative towards Trump and undermined a lot of his efforts at federalization when there wasn't that state cooperation. There's the tariff decision, obviously. There's the Kilmar-Abrego-Garcia decision, obviously. And so I think it's important. And I think that what's crucial though, is I think your opponents would grant that basic proposal, which is they're not totally beholden to Trump on everything. And they don't always act in concert with Trump. It reminds me a little bit about the discussion on like the Israel lobby or whatever. Am I not allowed to say that, by the way? I don't know. On TikTok, I'm not sure anymore. Where people will say, well, look at the fact that Obama had the JCPOA, and that wasn't what the Israel lobby wanted to do. And absolutely, that's true, right? And like the Israel lobby surely wasn't in support of some of the efforts of what Biden was doing in terms of trying to rekindle that relationship with or some of the negotiations that were going to develop perhaps into restarting the Iran talks. And in terms of some of the conditions that Biden was putting towards military aid, there weren't like a ton of them, but there were some. I mean, it wasn't just one for one, do everything that Israel wants to do. The question isn't, is there influence from Israel or the Israel lobby? The question isn't, is the court completely beholden to Trump? It's how much and to what degree. And so, yeah, I mean,
my disagreement there, and I gave this concession that the alignment, coincidental, I guess is the word. Is it just that the ideologies of the people on the Supreme Court just so happened to align with the kinds of things that Trump wants to do, man. Or is the Supreme Court making a partisan decision based on political context? Yeah,
they do sometimes. Right? Yeah, so on some things they don't. On some things it's way more like neutral application of law. These are on things that aren't like not usually partisan issues. I'll give you an example, right? This 9-0 decision that just happened on copyright that limited the extent of secondary liability for certain providers for copyright infringement for the ISPs. I don't think that was a 9-0 decision where I didn't really see much evidence of political influence or partisanship. However, the more untailored a ruling is to, I think, a good faith interpretation of law, I think the more likely it is that it's partisan influenced. And on some specific sets of doctrines and issues, it feels like the court is constantly giving Trump a bone where they wouldn't give a Democratic president a bone. And I can give you some examples. One that comes to mind right now is the Texas gerrymandering case, where you have Trump explicitly ordering his DOJ to do something about the Texas gerrymander that he wanted. Initially, Texas had refused to do it, but then Trump had provided this rationale of these race districts that he falsely claimed were illegal under the Voting Rights Act, that it was a violation of the Voting Rights Act to have these kind of majority-minority districts. And the cure that Texas implemented was purely based on race to cure a fake defect, or a defect that wasn't based in or premised in law that the DOJ had specifically called out. And everyone acknowledged that that was like the rationale. This is a race-based gerrymander. And if Democrats had tried that to the benefit of black people, right? If Democrats had done this same kind of like curing defect where they considered race to benefit black people, I think that there's no chance that the Supreme Court would have said this is not a racial gerrymander, because we're just like, we think that we disagree with the factual determinations of the trial court. After the trial court,
I think
supposed to give deference to.
This is outside the distinction I'm trying to make, though.
Okay.
And I'm getting super particular here, and I totally understand that. And I'm not trying to be black and white. I'm not trying to present the SCOTUS as heroes in the story. But in that situation, the difference is they might just have the ideology of, I fucking hate TikTok. I hate affirmative action. And that like belief itself is, you could argue, hypocritical. I'd say successfully, with the comparison that you just made, that's a hypocritical belief that when you see it in one form, you are fine with it, and you see it in another, you're not. The distinction that I'm drawing is not, do Kavanaugh, Alito, and Thomas.
Can we pause right there?
Like Can I real quick?
Sure.
Do they have like ideological blind spots and are hypocritical and not well thought out? It's, are they considering what will help their party and then rationalizing post hoc to help their party in the moment? That's the distinction I'm drawing.
I think that's what some of them are consciously doing. And I'll tell you why. It's so funny you just brought up that affirmative action point. Do you want to know? Because you got it completely reversed in the case that we're talking about. What the Texas Republicans were saying was, we're going to do this to help Hispanic people. Look at all these Hispanic, we're doing this because in Texas, there was a big swing among the Hispanic constituencies in favor of Trump. And so you can look up these statements of Abbott and legislators who were instrumental and whose intent is relevant to the racial gerrymandering case, specifically justifying their gerrymander, their mid-district gerrymander that started this whole thing, in terms of helping Hispanic people. Okay? You will find those statements. So you mentioned, they're just principally against affirmative action. The Texas Republican state government explicitly justified and used helping Hispanic people as a rationale to justify their racial gerrymander. And in fact, they made it majority Hispanic districts. And they were like, look at how many majority Hispanic districts we made. This is us showing that we like Hispanic people. And so maybe you didn't know this case, right? But like, you walked into an area in which Republicans were doing the affirmative action in favor of Hispanics, and they upheld it. They upheld the gerrymander.
I guess I'm not trying to make a statement about these cases. I'm trying to just draw the distinction using what you presented to me, right? Between like, were you comparing this, because it sounded like you were comparing this to an, if California, then they wouldn't, right? You're not comparing it to an area where they actually didn't do it.
So imagine if California had said something like this: we're curing these districts under the VRA, and look at how many beautiful Hispanic districts we've made. We've really helped out the Hispanic community. Like, imagine that Zoran Mamdani was instrumental in like saying, look at all of these Hispanic districts that we've created and we've helped the Hispanic community. That would be viewed traditionally as like affirmative action, right? Like you're trying to specifically help Hispanic people, right?
I don't know if this isn't really what I'm trying to talk about.
okay, I'm trying to show you the reason why I think this is partisan. And the way I'm doing it is with this one example. We can do another example if you want, but can we get through
but
this one?
I would agree that if you if you appoint 6 conservatives, like their rulings are going to tend to align with conservatives, and conservatives are going to benefit because of the conservatives, right?
That's
The
no
distinction
doubt.
that I'm trying to make is particularly, do we have examples of direct, like the ideology that they have plays second fiddle to a partisan objective in the current context?
Yes. What would it take for you to be convinced of that?
I mean, an example?
Yeah. So I'm giving you an example of somewhere where presumably legal principle and their dispositional attitudes towards certain policies would align with striking down an action, but they uphold it.
I guess I
And
would have to. So
that
what
is
I would need to be convinced would be to read through this, and it would just be to read this opinion, learn more about it. If it really just does come down to, we think affirmative action is okay, then yeah, that would convince me.
so. I'm not trying to say that the court will say in those terms affirmative action is okay. What I'm trying to offer you is
I'm being reductive.
so like the what I'm trying to offer you as proof is if there is no good faith in your mind or my mind, it's all subjective, right? In your mind and my mind, if there's no good faith legal um, application of precedent or even of supposedly neutral independent judicial philosophies that we can extract from a given ruling, then that I'm not saying that it proves 100%, but that's just like a bit of evidence to suggest, maybe this neutral judicial philosophy isn't what's guiding the decision, right? And the more of those we can stack up, it starts to build a case for, oh, maybe this is a more partisan court, a court that's actually quite partisan. Another data point I might point to is like the rates of overturning circuit courts and courts of appeals, in other words, below them in Trump's favor, and it being anomalous. So yeah, like there's a bunch of evidence. I'm not going to.
But Trump's administration itself was also anomalous, right?
That's true. Anomalously, now you can take the view that the litigation patterns that are challenging the administration, that's what's like anomalous, is like we never had this amount of like bad faith litigation against the administration. Or you could take the view, as I do, that the administration is just doing a bunch of very, very illegal things. And so you know, which one of those you think is the actual reason for the big rash of or a raft of litigation might influence why you, or whether you think it's justified that the court is so often overturning courts of appeals in Trump's favor. I think that
but then the distinction is still on top of all this, where okay, the shadow docket was actually crazy. It was insane, right? That I don't look at the shadow docket with like rosy eyes. I think that what happened in 2025 was really crazy. But have we put that in the category of ideological alignment or partisan considerations, right? That's the distinction.
That's another piece of evidence that shows my point, because to the extent that the shadow docket is being used as yes. So that's another bit of evidence, right? In that it's what you would expect for a partisan.
But it fits. But both explanations are valid, though, right?
So let me tell you why. I'll explain why I think that the use and the specific use of the shadow docket under this Chief Justice is, I think, shows it's more partisan. One,
versus ideological, yeah.
But versus judicially neutral, right? Versus neutral application of judicial principles. So again, it's not.
But I think this distinction is important, because obviously I don't think that like Kavanaugh, Thomas, and the conservative, I don't think they're neutral. Like I don't think that they're entering the law without a perspective that they're trying to bring into it that isn't really neutral. Like I think that they're biased, and in a lot of cases, I'm not underplaying it. I think they're wrong. I want to win elections and put liberals on the Supreme Court so that the rulings will change, because I think those rulings will be more neutral than theirs, right? But that's what I'm saying.
I'm just when I reference it, I'm not referencing like the mere fact that they align with Trump. This is, I think, building the case, and it's my position that the shadow docket shenanigans is building a case towards partisan decision making.
Yeah, okay.
The decision making is
I think you understand what
ideology.
I mean. So I'll let you go. Okay. I think you understand what I mean.
So I think that it's more likely if you had a more neutral majority on the Supreme Court, you would see more rationale in these incredibly important shadow docket decisions. In many shadow docket decisions, they don't even try to go through all the factors for TROs or for stays. They skip them. They just say it's reversed or whatever, and you have to read like concurrence or dissent to see, like, to kind of gauge where the court is at. So the mere fact that they're unwilling to write down on paper what their rationale is, to me, thinks it's an expedient, and they're using the shadow docket to avoid complicated issues in the favor of the Trump administration. Another example of this is for the case involving the overturning of Humphrey's executor. They made this like exception for the Federal Reserve that makes no sense, didn't explain it whatsoever, other than like half a line. And that is.
But I think that's explained in Kavanaugh's ideology, though, which is just like this weird pragmatism of because I think so, which is why
it's not a Kavanaugh opinion. It was a per curiam. I'm not talking about Kavanaugh. This is the court. I'm speaking of the majority in general.
Okay, I hear that distinction.
Another is an application of the major questions doctrine for all manner of immigration issues. They don't seem to apply the major questions doctrine.
Can we add the texture though? Can we add the connections between, like, how I'm hearing these and I'm like, yeah, that is an example of the Supreme Court doing something I disagree with, but where's the thing that leans it towards the category of partisan and not just the category of ideological?
Yeah, combined with their actual rulings on the merits that are incoherent, don't make any sense. The tendency is for all of these, incoherent explanations or the lack of explanations or the contradictions to prior precedents or at least stated ideologies or judicial ideologies of the court, that these, by and large, not all the time, right? They invoked major questions on tariffs to Trump's negatively to Trump. I'm not saying all the time, but a lot of the time to Trump's benefit. And I think it's more than you would expect on the view that, well, they're just more conservatives on the court. And the specific reasons invoked in these various different decisions, I think, combined with the shenanigans on the shadow docket, combined with, by the way, statements by Alito out in the public, to me suggest that that there's a deep partisan effect.
Okay. I guess I found a distinction. I'm glad we had this talk. I think that I bring an assumption into this conversation that ideology is oftentimes way more inconsistent than, maybe I'm not going to say you assume, you probably would agree with me if we broke it down, but like, I think I just like naturally lead with like, yeah, if conservatives, not even conservatives, if anyone's following their ideology, there's going to be inconsistencies. Like there's going to be like, even like really dissonant, really obvious inconsistencies of like, really, if you followed the logic of what you're saying, you're invalidating what you said over here, but like, we're not like, I guess I just bake that into my analysis when I say like, I don't have reason to believe that they're making partisan considerations just by looking at like inconsistencies, because I feel like that is a part of an ideological motivation. I'm not even sure, and I'm really not even here to prove one way or the other. And like, I would agree that I think Kavanaugh is probably like moved by the times in such a way that he might not have feared political retribution in like 2018 as much to write Trump the United States. And then he lives through 2020. And because he's like a not smart guy, he's like, oh man, this is really scary. They really are going after Trump. That's something I have to consider.
That's not Kavanaugh, bro. That's Roberts. And my critiques aren't.
Is it? I'm sorry. I keep defaulting to Kavanaugh.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
trying to,
you shouldn't do that because it's way broader than that. I mean, this is not just Kavanaugh. It is aimed at Alito. It's aimed at Thomas. It's certainly aimed at Chief Justice Roberts. This is not something. And again, I don't say that Roberts is sort of always partisan, but it's just skewed. I don't say that and Roberts is corrupt.
The reason that I default to Kavanaugh is just because Kavanaugh's pragmatism is a thing that I have in my head. And I go to that when I think about the pragmatism.
You think he's pragmatic?
Well, just the idea that he makes considerations of like, he's the one complaining about refunds in the dissent, right? Like he's like, well, that's not pragmatic. We can't do that.
Right, but that's another example of the court being inconsistent, because that's not the only time that they've considered pragmatism and like living constitutionalism in their rulings.
Yeah.
I mean, think about Trump versus United States. That was a case in which it was explicitly looking towards results and what's going to happen, which isn't supposed to be the domain of an originalist, right? An originalist or a conservative jurist isn't supposed to do that.
I have, and Erudite can confirm, I have all caps messages in our group chat of me screaming that Kavanaugh is going to complain about pragmatism and then spend a whole paragraph talking about pragmatism. Like, I think these inconsistencies are there. I think that they're very hypocritical. It's just like a nuanced point of like, but I think that is a function of their ideology, not a function of, well, I need to consider what's best for the Republican Party and then post hoc that decision. It's
I don't think it's clear. It's like a mixed motive. I think that there's alignment sometimes in ideology, but not always. I think there's a tendency, like these people are politically conservative. Take just a look at what circles they run in, who they hang out with. Like they're definitely politically conservative. I don't say they're always spineless and lack of principles, but it does define a lot of the decisions on the political stuff very deeply. And you mentioned Kavanaugh just for a second. Let me finish this thought on Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh is in these concurrences almost like explicitly responding to the Academy, responding to press reports on the Kavanaugh stop thing where he's trying to defend himself. And so these just seem like actors that are highly in tune with what's happening politically. And you can read the scorn in like Alito's opinion of Democrats. You can hear the scorn in Thomas's opinions as well as Kavanaugh. And so, you know, sometimes a little less so on Roberts, et cetera. But these are actors that are not, in my opinion, being so subtle that partisanship is affecting their rulings. I think it's happening. Not 100%, yeah, and I would not all the time, but yeah.
I would be okay with mixed. Here's the thing. I would be okay with mixed. I would be okay with like disappointingly mixed. I would be okay with frustratingly or dangerously mixed. And I what I was responding to in that conversation was this idea that when it's in like they won't say it outright, but it's like, and then I think there's a back and forth on the fact that they'll say that the Trump could literally do anything, and the Supreme Court will just do, like, they'll say or do whatever
they
need
that?
To stop him. In moments, in conversations, that will be the premise that's being presented to protect another point. And well, then
I just don't know who argues that. I feel like that they don't. They just put
Destiny said it a couple times.
They put their thumb on this. You think that Destiny's position? I just want to be honest. Yes or no? Do you think Destiny's position is they will always give Trump a win?
Inconsistently sometimes.
I don't think that that's his position. I think that
it's not his position all the time. He in that conversation he clarified and said that that's not what he thinks. But okay, and I'm entering nebulous territory. It feels like when we're in a heated moment and we're trying to defend a larger point, we borrow a narrative where they're more like that than he'll say when you challenge him on it.
Well, I mean, I think that's, if anyone has the position that they always do what's in Trump's favor, that's just like very easily disproven. Yeah, I don't know what to say. It just feels like a straw man though.
But then we're into the position where like really what they'll say is that they didn't stay it specifically for partisan interest, and that the only reason they even got rid of it was because of partisan interest. That at that point they were saving Trump. Right? It's those are the sentences that I'm responding to.
They will selectively give deference to the executive branch when it comes to these kind of like judgment calls on stays, etc. when it's Trump and not Biden. And so when it's Biden's policies, there's a stay that's maintained, or there often is. And when Trump's policies, one of his marquee policies, an illegal tax is being levied on the American people, and they just, and it's very obviously illegal. I mean, I don't know what to say. Like, it is so obviously illegal in my opinion. There's not even,
and I say this as a tragedy.
Yes,
I say this
three
as a
of the justices, that is not, and it's not enough to know that justices like agree or disagree to prove a point, right? Like, yes, you referenced at one point in the conversation, well, it was a 9-0 decision in Anderson, part of it, right? The state holding of the Anderson decision on the Section 3 thing. That doesn't mean that was like an obviously correct decision, or that at least there's no sign of.
What I was saying there wasn't that 9-0 what I wasn't saying that the 9-0 had like a truth quality to it. I was saying I don't know. I haven't read that. In this moment, I can't say more. So all I'm going to say is that like that's what I would expect if I were to read into it. I would imagine that I would find something there, but I didn't know what that was.
Yeah, but if you read the opinion, even the liberals on the state holding, it's incoherent. I mean, it is totally incoherent, this opinion. And it seems a way to try.
And that's fair. I haven't read it. I don't know. And
Okay.
but I wasn't really trying to make like a statement about like the 9-0 having some sort of like transitive property of truth. And
Sure,
like I said, I go ahead.
No, sure. Listen. All I'm trying to say is that the Supreme Court is, in my opinion, highly skewed, highly partisan. Now, I don't say that is grounds for calling them all corrupt, because there are ways in which that partisan influence can be subtle, in which you can't. Can you prove 100%? Can you read their minds? No, but like the overwhelming pattern here, to say nothing of the invocation of certain doctrines, which explicitly they don't hold to at later times, inconsistent rationales, a lack of clarity for the lower courts a lot of the times, like all of that to me indicates that the best conclusion is that they're putting their thumb on the scale for Republicans, and they're giving Republicans all of their judicial sacred cows. You mentioned the Chevron doctrine. That's a sacred cow of conservatives, and people like Clarence Thomas will write opinions telling the world how he's going to rule on cases not before them, right? You're not supposed to do, right? You're not supposed to give advisory opinions. And Clarence Thomas is out here saying, I will consider Jack Smith not even appointed legally. That's not before them. Clarence Thomas is out here giving clues on how to.
That was in the dissent, right?
That was in a concurrence, I think, on the Jack Smith, on one of the Jack Smith, on maybe it might have been Trump versus States, but he did do that.
I've heard, but haven't seen that was dissent.
He did do that in the Missouri case. I think Missouri v. Biden, or the Nebraska v. Biden case. It might be Missouri. He was giving like a roadmap for how conservatives could create a law to regulate these social media companies that he would approve. Kavanaugh did a similar thing when it came to invoking the National Guard. Like, oh, you could do this, this, and that. He did the same thing with the tariffs. Like, oh, the president could do this, this, and this. Right? It seems like political signaling.
Right? That was Kavanaugh. Yeah, that was dissent.
That was Kavanaugh dissent. Yeah, no, but why are you doing that?
Yeah, like, I agree. And because your chat's been asking about it, I am still reading because obviously I learned about it yesterday. But an example of this is in the concurrence for United States v. Texas. It was it the student loan forgiveness or the there was an immigration thing?
That's the Nebraska case. Or Missouri case, it might be. I don't know. Biden v. Missouri.
It was about the universal injunction concept, and
I was told
by Josiah. I was told by Josiah that they denied the universal injunction under Biden, or they denied the getting rid of it under Biden and then accepted it under Trump. What they did, and I found the opinion, what they did was in the concurrence, they added what you're talking about. They did sort of hey, we're going to project what we're going to do later on universal injunctions, which was that they were probably going to die in 2023. So on that point, chat's asking about it. It's not really relevant to what we're talking about, except for, it's the same shape of thing. But they were saying that the Supreme Court was upholding universal injunctions under Biden, but actually they wrote a concurrence basically saying that if you challenge this, it's probably gone in 2023, which for that specific point, and then they denied the thing on standing grounds differently, which you could argue.
Yeah, the conservatives constantly do this. They constantly signal what decisions they want to challenge and get rid of. They did this with Roe v. Wade. They've done this with all manner of different decisions that they've. The VRA is another one where, again, after upholding core aspects of the VRA, they're like signaling, hey, maybe you challenge it this way, and that's exactly what's happening. And now it's like open season for litigants, smart litigants, to just look at the concurrences of what these Supreme Court justices are writing and just file accordingly. And they all go to district courts in Texas. They go to the Fifth Circuit to get a favorable opinion below. And then the Supreme Court will, at least they know that they have some sympathetic ears there. And so to me, it's like that behavior, again, in addition to the substance of a lot of these opinions, which can't, I think, be construed as faithful applications of the law. To me, that just like it's the best understanding is that there's a partisan skew, a deep partisan skew that is not explainable in terms of neutral judicial principles or whatever, to the extent that those exist.
Cool. I think that I clarified what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I am interested in more, if you had more to say, or if as you talk about it, I am interested in your input as it was or as it is now. If there's any, like, I'm not fully on board just because I don't know the things that you're talking about, so I'm hesitating. But if you want to point me in the direction of anything, I like any of these opinions that you think are like really good examples of like no rationale partisanry, or like you can point me in the direction of those, I will sit down and I will read them.
Oh, sure. The Texas gerrymandering case I went to the Supreme Court, where there was a district court finding that like this is a racial gerrymander. It was obviously a racial gerrymander, and it was sold as a way to help Hispanic people. That's what I was trying to show you. Like, this is a case of affirmative action in favor of Hispanic people, right? To help Republicans, but in favor of Hispanic people, where they were saying, look at all the great effects it'll have on Hispanics. And if a Democrat tried to do this, there's no way, right? There's no way that the Supreme Court would have upheld it and been like, well, even though they were explicitly using race as a criteria as found by the district court, and even though we're supposed to give deference to the factual determinations of the trial court, and even though they explicitly said this was to help a racial minority, in this case Hispanics, we are disagreeing with the trial court, and we're just going to say it wasn't racial, it was political, and therefore they get to keep their gerrymander. There's not a world that I can imagine if that fact pattern was for a Democratic gerrymander to explicitly help like black people, or to explicitly help Hispanic people, which didn't fit under the category of the VRA specifically, the Jingles test or whatever. So it's like put it outside the normal VRA application of principles. But if that fact pattern had presented with the Democratic gerrymander that was explicitly trying to help Hispanic people, that would have been like absolutely overturned as a racial gerrymander. Absolutely. And the deferential principles there, it's incoherent. I encourage you to read the dissent there. There's just no way. And it's so funny because immediately your mind went, when I brought that up, you're like, well, isn't it just the case that conservatives are against affirmative action? And wouldn't that explain it? One, I'm like, query whether that itself is a partisan inclination from a policy perspective, right? To the extent that it's a policy perspective as opposed to an interpretation of the Equal Protection Clause. But even assume that it is an interpretation of the Equal Protection Clause, their position against affirmative action. This is a case in which the Republicans were doing the affirmative action. They were the ones doing the racial-based gerrymandering, and the Supreme Court said okay because it helps Republicans, and so that was your initial mind was like, oh, of course they're not against affirmative action, and that intuition should tell you, well, then why did they sign off on this racial gerrymander from Texas?
Well, what I'm saying, and my response to that was, it would be, if I were to pursue like understanding this more, where I would expect the answer to be would be in what ultimately decided that case, and whether or not they have like it. Were they looking at it? Were they making a decision on affirmative action, or was it somewhere else down the line? Right. And I don't know the answer to that question, and I'm interested to figure that out. Like
they're basically saying it's obviously a partisan gerrymander. It's not racial. It's just, there's just no way though that like, yes, they will give you an explanation, which is like, we're not being inconsistent, we're being consistent, and this is how. But it's just like not believable. Like, oh yeah, it's a partisan gerrymander.
Okay, but then what we should have brought up in this moment isn't that they made this decision for this reason. It's that they we have to make the argument that they are misrepresenting their.
They're not saying we are good with racial gerrymanders. They're never going to say we're okay with racial gerrymanders. We're okay with affirmative action. If that's your standard of proof to show that they're being politically inclined, then I'm sorry. There's always going to be some rationale, right? This will mean that you'll always just accept what Trump is going to do, like the facial reason that's given by Trump. The point is, if you look at the substance, it's not believable, it's not credible, it's not plausible. That's what you have to look at. You can't just look at the self-serving statements of the justices themselves, although sometimes they show their hand explicitly.
I don't think when I'm reading this decision, because I will read it, and maybe if I have anything interesting to say, I'll chime back in. But my standard for implausibility, right? Like if we're going to assess their stated reason is implausible for reasons, I don't imagine I'm going to have like a high standard there. I'm willing to engage the idea that their stated reasoning was implausible. I just in this moment don't have knowledge there. So I'm just sort of like taking my hands off it and saying, I don't know. I'd have to read it and see if I find their reasoning implausible, if I actually do see blah, 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 blah.
So
I can take your word for it,
okay.
but I'm just saying that that's where my knowledge ends, is I don't know.
This is the quote from Governor Abbott, as in the Kagan dissent. In one interview, for example, he, meaning Governor Abbott, stated that, quote, "We wanted to remove those coalition districts and draw them in ways that in fact turned out to provide more seats for Hispanics." That was a direct quote from Governor Abbott. Okay? Another quote: "We want to make sure that we don't have maps that don't impose coalition districts. We want to make sure that that they drew Hispanic seats." So, if imagine a Democrat had said, we wanted to remove these coalition districts or this majority white districts and draw them in ways that turned out to provide more seats for Hispanics. Again, assuming no VRA compliance. There's no way that a conservative court wouldn't be like, that is racial discrimination. That they wouldn't say, this is racial discrimination. We're striking down this map. It's illegal. It's unconstitutional. It's obviously a racial gerrymander, right? That's what Abbott said. Abbott said, we wanted to remove these coalition districts and draw them in ways that turned out to provide more seats for Hispanics. Just replace that with blacks. We want to provide more seats for LGBT. We want to provide more seats for black people. There's just like no world in which this court would close their eyes. And yeah, they're like, okay, we don't think that the court properly considered the factual. And they have some like bullshit protectual procedural ground as well. But it's all pretext. It's like it's very poorly articulated and very poorly supported. And yeah, so I encourage you. It's called Abbott versus League of United Latin American Citizens, and it's garbage. It's a bullshit case, and it shows that the court is partisan in my view. It's one example.
Yeah, and like I said, I will read it. If I come to any interesting conclusion, I'll chime in.
Sure.
I guess I'm not. I just really want to communicate because I'm really not trying to say that like I have reason to believe that this example isn't partisan, or I'm just and ultimately I think I feel okay with what we've said in mind. Like I'm not looking for some sort of pure unpartisan look. I prove that SCOTUS isn't partisan.
You have to be skeptical. You have to be critical. And so, for example, like if someone says Trump examines what Trump is saying about mail-in voting, he says mail-in voting is cheating. He says it's cheating, and someone says, well, hang on a second, you voted by mail, and then Trump says, no, but I'm the president, so it's different. Do you buy Trump's explanation there that he's not a hypocrite? Well, I guess he's not really a hypocrite. He holds to this principle that presidents are different in the context of mail-in voting. But no, you don't believe Trump.
In that instance, I would get particular about how that was presented, but I understand what you mean.
You know what I mean? Like, you have to scrutinize the self-serving statements made by these actors. Otherwise, you're always going to conclude that they're being straight up, because they're just always going to have, no matter how bullshit or thin the pretext is, how thin of a read of explanation it is, they will have some way to address it, but oftentimes they don't, right? Oftentimes that's why the shadow docket shit is so fucked, because oftentimes they're not addressing it. Or when they do, they'll be like, oh, the Federal Reserve is different, lol. Like, what the fuck was that? The Federal Reserve is different, lol? All these other agencies can't be independent. They can't have protections from removal of the president, but the Federal Reserve is different, lol. Why? They're all foundational, like based on the same court case, Humphrey's executor. And there's no explanation. It's just they wanted to protect the Federal Reserve, but they also want to let Trump do whatever he wants in the executive branch. So there you go.
Do you think that leaving if it truly, and I will say this, if there really is truly no rationale, if nothing is really put
they'll
forward,
say something.
Opinion,
they'll say, well, there was a first bank of the United States.
My question's different. I'm going somewhere else. What I'm saying is that, like, if there's clearly no rationale and they just draw like special pleading, right? Like that's endgame for literally anything that I'm saying right now. That's complete destruction of anything I'm saying, right? But if they do create a clear, like, decisive, discernible principle around like quasi-private financial banks, and that becomes something that can then insulate other agencies if they're designed in that way, Like, do you see it as even
Upholding that?
possible that that's something? Well,
No.
I just mean, like, do you see that as even like possible that that would be the consequence of that ruling? Is that there's
No.
or you see it
I think it would be
exclusively as
sui
they just
generis.
don't want?
So the Latin term
Yeah.
is sui generis. So if that would happen, right? So imagine this. Imagine Democrats are like, oh, we have this decision that says Federal Reserve. That structure is okay. And so they just start designing all of their independent agencies in this way, where there's like it has a quasi-private public thing, right? There's no way the court would be like, it's okay for the Federal Reserve because that was passed on a Tuesday, or they'll say it's because it deals with money and these don't deal with, like, they'll find some basis. The same thing on the Anderson decision, right? They're like, states can't enforce, and this is 9-0, by the way. It's disgraceful. The liberals sign onto this. 9-0, they say states, of course, can't enforce Section 3 to federal candidates. Think about the crazy patchwork that would be created. No law at all. Complete bullshit, complete dog shit, completely untethered, just rewriting Section 3. But okay, let's say that made any sense. Do you think that if there were a challenge to Cenk Uygur to be on the ballot and a state disallowed him to be on the ballot because he's not a natural-born citizen, do you think that they would be like, states can't enforce this? No! Gorsuch himself, in a ruling in a lower federal court, said, of course states are empowered to enforce these qualifications for president when it comes to the other provisions of the Constitution, just not Section 3. We now have a case out of, I think it's Nebraska, one of these places, where initially a trial court had ruled that that this person couldn't be on the ballot because they weren't a good faith candidate. Like, the states
but this is what I'm saying, that
they wouldn't uphold the principle of the patchwork. They wouldn't uphold the principle. They would create something like, Section 3 is just different.
The allowance for this level of hypocrisy to me just exists in ideological people. And I guess if that's something that clears up what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, but when you see it enough, when you see it enough and it's benefiting.
Yeah.
Trump,
and I agree. Yeah. I'm with you. I don't have the information. I honestly I do not have the bona fides to like even prove my point, right? I'm sitting here, I'm like just being honest. Like, I don't have the ability to like parse through all of this and tell you that like actually I have a good case to say that SCOTUS isn't partisan, right? I am learning right now. I'm trying to learn. I am trying to prompt for like the cases to read into. And I will say, and I think I'll leave it here because I just wanted to clear up exactly what I was trying to say. Like, at the beginning, what I was saying was that, yeah, I agree. The Trump administration has damaged the lives of thousands of people. It's without a doubt the most damaging administration of all time. If we do not patch the things that Trump has done, it is a death nail to our country and the lives of many people. The things that I was saying, I tried to clarify that multiple times, and the things that I was saying seemed to be interpreted as if I was trying to conflict with that. I really wasn't trying to conflict with that. And I'll leave it on the note that, hey, we're years away from any of this. Like, we're a whole administration away from really all the answers on this. I will say, if the Supreme Court really does a completely irrational circle around the Federal Reserve, that's a kill shot for what I'm talking about.
They already have. For me, 100%. They've done that. Wait, they've done it.
No. So, but if when tested, if we were to go and President Buttigieg reinstates USAID or Department of Education as whatever fake bullshit standard to like the word of the law that they put out, and they still shoot it down, like that is the kill shot to everything that I'm saying. There's no surviving that.
You have to wait for Democrats to do that. I mean, and think about what you'd be asking Democrats to do. You're asking Democrats to insulate these agencies from Democrats. And so Democrats would have to be taking the high road to create a set of agencies that they would have less control over. So I mean, like, listen,
and like I said, I want more liberals on the court. Like, let's not forget. I'm like, I hate all of these ideologies. I don't like. I wish they were not in power. I would like us to win the next 3 elections so that we can clear out this majority, please. I don't like it.
Okay, but don't sweep for the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is doing an awful job. The Supreme Court has not upheld the Constitution. And there's so many examples. Yeah, but we're just in a situation
where it's like there's always something that you're not saying, right? Like, just because I want to clarify that, like, and this was my opener. Like, the whole point is that I'm not trying to downplay the bad. I'm trying to characterize it so that we can predict it moving forward, right? And I'm not saying that I very clearly don't have the bona fides to do this with more like assertion than you do. Like, I 100%. I'm just trying to categorize the kind of bad that it is in a way that so far I've seen. From like my eyes, I've seen the picture that I see, but I'm acknowledging that my eyes have seen much less than you, and I'm willing to look into more.
Sure. But like, that's why I think if you take a position on whether the Supreme Court is or is not partisan, or at least skewed in a partisan way, not because of coincidence in terms of judicial philosophy, but in terms of actual unexplainable partisan bias, that if you are asked in that, I think that the view should be, I'm not sure. I don't know.
I think I was, and this, I will admit that you're right. I should probably be clear in that. I would also say that I very regularly in that conversation presented it with a level of humility. Like I was very clear that this is just what I've seen. I'm not speaking from a place of authority. I think the heatedness of that whole conversation might have I might have gotten transplanted on what I was saying. And maybe I should have spoken a little bit more clearly about my hesitancy there. But yeah, I don't think I've ever attempted to be confident on this, that I'm only sharing my perspective, my point of view. But I do think that my point of view is not irrational given limited information, right? I think it's fair. Like this is the realm of reasonable disagreement. I would.
What do you
say.
mean by
We agree
irrational?
that it's at least like. I just mean like reasonable minds can disagree here, short of like a perfect everyone's read everything, right?
So
there's
based on an incomplete and not representative view, is it unreasonable for you to draw the conclusion that the court is fair? I would say, yeah. Given an uninformed view, I don't know. I guess, yeah, it would be reasonable to draw that conclusion.
But the distinction I'm drawing, the distinction I'm drawing here, I think is important because, like, if the statement is it reasonable to be wrong? The answer to that is always no. So I'm trying to draw the distinction of like
I don't think it's always unreasonable to be wrong. It's sometimes reasonable to be wrong.
Okay.
You hear what I'm saying? I'm like, I think that you should be agnostic as to whether or not the court is or is not partisan. If you have like an insufficient on your own view set of
I feel like I've
information.
seen enough of a trend that indicates something. When I
I'm
read
not
into
sure.
like,
is your view good enough to draw a conclusion or not good enough to draw a conclusion?
it's good enough to. I would say that I can point to a trend in the things that I've read, and that people are. Well, what I'm doing is I'm pointing to a trend in what I've read. I'm saying, hey, this is what I've read, and people are telling me, oh, well, look at this, and this. And so far, in
your view, is that
turn
sufficient
over
to
those
draw?
Stones, I'm not necessarily.
In your view, is that sufficient to draw like a reasonable conclusion based on your?
I think with a little humility, yeah. I mean, I've read more than. I'm not sitting here saying that I've read nothing. I've read a lot of Supreme Court opinions over the last 25 years. After the last year, 2025.
Listen, I'm not.
I haven't read nothing.
I'm not trying to argue that like your particular belief as to your information that's available to you. I don't know, like whatever your epistemic reality is one way or the other. I'm just trying to say that I disagree with your view, which is I do think there's a partisan skew.
Yeah, and I accept that. I think what compelled me to get on this call was just specifically that I felt that I guess that humility that I was bringing forward, I don't think it was clear, and it changed how I think you interpreted what I was saying.
Got it.
I don't think that the Trump administration did no damage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think I'm good.
Well,
I
just think that there's.
If you have anything else, I'm happy to hear it. But
I just think there's like some downplaying from you and Hutch. I don't say that you guys think it's like good or it's like not. I don't think your position is that it's not bad. I just think that there's like this view that like, oh, the institutions are, by however you want to define sufficient to hold Trump back. And I just think that there is a massive failure in our structure here. Most of it, I'll grant, is personnel. Most of the problems are, I would say, personnel. That, as good as your institutions might be, it's hard to, to have that interaction with like just bad people who just don't care about them, right? Like imagine you wrote a law, like, okay, we're going to fix everything. We're going to pass a new law that says don't be corrupt, don't be political, right? Like whoever is interpreting that, whoever is applying that, there's a fundamental power issue there that is almost before the issue of like the new regulation. I do think that there are things that you can do at the margin, and even significant reforms that would like better odds of not having those issues in the future. But yeah, no, I just heard, and maybe I can't even point to specifics now. The Supreme Court stuck out to me, and then I've heard also Hutch talk about like the issues that Trump has raised. We can all just reverse in it like very simply as the next Democratic president, and I don't think it's that easy. I think it's going to be a decades-long process to clean up the mess. And
Yeah,
we'll be dealing with
and
the
my
rest of our
opener
lives.
was very clear that I don't think that Buttigieg like reversing the DOE-EOs is enough. Like I think that the future of this country depends on like legislating. It depends on codifying and changing and building. And thankfully, they might be handing us the opportunity to do that. It seems like they already have. I don't think that the status quo, where if we were to just reverse everything, the status quo is now incredibly Republican favored, right? But I think the reason I think that this distinction is important is not because like you agreed, I'm not trying to downplay the badness of it, but what we're trying to do is draw prescriptions for the future. And part of that is understanding how those things will act in the future. And when I say that the Supreme Court is ideological, it's when I'm responding to points where it's like, oh, well, Trump could just do X, Y, and Z. If I try to respond to that with, well, I think the courts would stop them, and then what I get in return is, well, the courts will just do whatever they need to support Trump, right? That's the thing that I'm trying to figure out. That's the thing that I'm trying to hash out, is how much of the court, like, is the court just so blindly partisan that they would allow Trump to just, like, F the elections over, right? And I find that, whatever blend of partisan and ideological, I find that idea that these people that sit there, barring a few exceptions, would just let Trump like deploy ICE, cut USPS funding, whatever
Deploy
the
ICE,
strategy is.
Wait, you mean deploy ICE for the voter booths and stuff like that?
Yeah, whatever the thing is.
Yeah, who knows? Don't be that confident. I mean, I suspect that they'll have something to say about it, depending on how it's done. But
I am I am astonished with how much of it is unconfident. It is terrible how I cannot be that confident, but I am moderately confident. I'm like,
well, really,
like
if Trump deploys ICE and
ish.
if Trump deploys like ICE in proximity to voting booths, and so he does that, and like the Supreme Court comes out with a decision that says something like, it's not the role of the judiciary to tell the president how to enforce immigration law. And so whatever order below can't be enforced. The courts can't order specific enforcement patterns, and the ICE is given the authority to operate all over the country. And so it's not up to the judiciary to tell them they can't be in a given location. And federal law preempts state election law. Would that like shock you?
I think that I'm gonna plead the fifth a little bit, because I really like I don't think I can defend my points here very well.
Okay. I wouldn't be shocked if they're like,
what I would say in general, and I'm just admitting that I can't defend this very well. My belief would be that even if there's some sort of allowance for that, I think that there would be a justification for not allowing that to happen. Even if we get past that point, I think there are many other battles that would be fought as the states absolutely fight back. And I don't see the Supreme Court agreeing with like an election that had been like physically and directly tampered with and just saying, well, sucks to suck. And I understand the fucking Florida Al Gore comparison. I'm still reading about that.
yeah, you should read about that.
I get it. I get it 100%.
You should read about that.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Listen, let's talk again sometime.
I appreciate you talking to me. That was pretty much it. I'm just trying to correct the at least what I was trying to say, even if I think at the end of the day I'm not quite saying it as well as I could be.
No, I appreciate that, and listen, we can talk again. But thank you for clarifying. All right, peace out.
Talk to you later.
Okay, folks, I have time for one person from TikTok Unfortunately, sorry, I just get obsessed with these conversations. Maybe this is like bad for TikTok or whatever, but I am going to try to bring someone in from TikTok if there is a person to do that with, but that'll be the last person I gotta go. Obviously we prefer a MAGA person. 2 viewers. Okay. Let's see. 1 second. I'm just gonna how do I do this? How do I add? Dynamic. Multi-guest. Okay, right there. But how do I actually add? Oh, there's Purely Antics and Reynald. Let me just add Reynald real quick to thank him. Just 1 second. Yo, what up,
Hello.
Bang? What up? What up? Oh, I can add multiples.
Oh boy.
All right, I'm gonna add you and this guy Purely Antics. And then we can go for like 10 minutes, and then I gotta be out. Purely Antics.
Hate to be a party pooper.
No worries, no worries.
There's a little bit of an echo on. So.
Oh, hang on. Oh, let me mute.
Yeah.
Let me mute myself, right?
What's up?
So is this better? No echo, right?
Yes, this is better.
Okay.
Sounds good. Sounds
All right, cool.
But I don't know if the chat's gonna hear you now, so we'll see.
The chat? Which chat?
TikTok.
I think they can hear me, right? You guys can hear me? Testing 1, 2, 3. TikTok?
Let's see.
We can't hear.
Yeah, Rennie.
We can hear
Can't hear
Pisco
me.
not guess. Oh. So is there why is there an echo if I leave this on? There shouldn't be, right? Unless you're listening to the stream.
I need to think because I know this is a problem. I just don't remember how to fix it. I mean, regardless, it's doable.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I was gonna say that.
First of all, thank you, Reynald, for
should,
helping me set up.
Yeah, of course. I was gonna say if you have any free time, we should schedule a thing because I've got a couple gems I would like to share with you. But
Hell yeah. We can definitely do that if you have time tonight. Perhaps. I just can't in like the next. I have to go in like 8 to 9 minutes. But that's it.
Yeah. Later tonight would be fine.
Word.
But I want to say, I'm glad to see you here.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you. A little bit of a, inside conflict on the Democrat stuff, but yeah, no MAGA people yet, but yeah, it looks like it's warm waters.
Yeah, they were flooding the chat in the middle.
Oh
but,
shit!
People are real impatient on here, so.
Oh, no worries.
That is unfortunately true.
I'll pay more attention to them later.
But yeah, enjoyable stuff. I just wanted
Thank you,
to
man.
say hi, welcome.
Yeah.
Since you were accepting people up, just wanted to greet. So.
Well, thank you, Reynald.
Appreciate you. Good job.
We'll interact more later and appreciate it. Let's talk tonight, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Later, man. Purely Antics. What's up?
Yeah, I really just wanted to come up and let you know because I saw you and whoever else was on earlier talking about this, the TikTok language.
Oh yeah.
So just so you know, cuss words are by and large pretty much fine.
Okay.
I don't think I've ever gotten taken down for swear words or anything like that. The big thing is any slur at all is almost immediately a ban or a warning.
Got it.
And there will be occasionally people who come up on your panel who their sole purpose is just to say slurs to try to get you taken down, which is
That's
unfortunate about debating on TikTok. Yeah. It's rare, but it does still happen. And then there are maybe a couple topics that occasionally get people taken down. And a few words that are kind of random. I think the trans stuff will sometimes get you taken down, but
Got it. Well, I don't really do much
Yep.
of the culture stuff that often, but
Yeah.
I'll keep that in mind. I'll try to keep it PC. I do appreciate the suggestion though.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, that's all. Thanks,
All
man.
right. Thank you, brother. Let's see if there are any other. Hopefully, are there conservatives? Where are the conservatives? I don't even know. How do I see how many people are there? Is it like 13 people? I don't even see how many people are there. Okay. Any cringy liberal? Okay. Yo, what up, cringy liberal?
Right.
How we doing? I got like 5 minutes.
Okay, okay, it's the election topic. You can't talk about the election stuff. That'll get you banned.
Oh, I can't talk about like
Just
any
like-
election. Or
Yeah, if you talk, well, it depends. It's really random, but if you talk about like J6, sometimes it'll just get you taken down immediately.
got it. That's good. Good to know.
And I maybe can help you with the audio writing stuff later, but that's gonna have to be like some other time. But yeah, thanks for letting me up. See you.
Oh, of course. Appreciate you. Okay, folks. I think unless we have a conservative. Yeah, I went to TikTok just to catch conservatives. I probably have to go. Like, I would get obsessed anyway, and I do have to go. So I appreciate everyone chilling with me on this TikTok stream. Well, maybe I'll be able to do another one tonight, and we'll actually focus on the TikTok instead of being diverted. But appreciate all of you, and we'll also try to get the virtual cam. I don't know what the requirements are. Kind of, you have to be on desktop, and it's just annoying. But yeah. Okay, love you guys very much. And this is, by the way, bye to everybody. This is bye to YouTube. This is bye to Twitch. Bye to TikTok. It's all going down. It's all done. But we'll be back maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. All right.